Water Street brownfield cleanup program. There was some weekend work done, and she's going to give a brief summary of where we're at. Take it away, Laura. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thanks everyone. So the Langen conducted the test pit investigation over the weekend. This past weekend, they got 4 of the test pits done on Saturday and a 5th on Friday or Sunday. I'm sorry. So that's the whole program. They followed the protocol per the revised remedial design investigation work plan that was approved by DEC, and all of our comments had been addressed satisfactory either through a response from the agencies that Tom Facillo, the other consultant for the community, and I had reviewed and felt comfortable with, or they made changes to the program, the latter of which was the most of the comments were addressed through changes. So they initiated all the protocols. And the bottom line is, which was a relief, I mean, they found really nothing with respect to the mercury vapor or the VOCs, the volatile organics, either in the work zone or in the camp around the perimeter. All of the camp results came back 0 for mercury and for volatile organics for both Saturday and Sunday. The highest handheld instrument reading with the Jerome J505, which was like 0.36 micrograms per cubic meter. That was a 1 instantaneous reading, not a 15-minute average concentration. And I don't have the daily field reports yet from Langen. I did speak to Langen this afternoon, and the reason why we don't have the daily field reports from them yet is because their subcontractor, Emilcott, who does the camp air quality monitoring, is still reducing all the data and providing it to Langen. They should have those draft daily field reports to us tomorrow, and then I'll look at them and make sure everything looks in order, and then they'll send them and post them up on the 250 BCP website. So they did encounter some debris, which is not surprising. We expected that. They found, brick and remnants of the building foundation in the former thermometer factory, and also in some of the locations that we had asked to be added into the program in the void space area over by Beekman and Water. They found the brick and the remnant of the foundation, but they found no, elevated mercury concentrations at all. I mean, again, the only real, the highest level they did report was just a one-time instantaneous reading of the 0.36, which is, well under the 1 microgram per cubic meter, which is a 15-minute average to begin with. This was just a one-time instantaneous result. So they backfilled all the excavations, restored the asphalt in each location. So, I mean, the results, like I said, we'll take a look at their camp results, which will have the raw data, as has been requested and agreed to by the agencies and by Langen, that we will receive that. There were no camp units moved across the street because all the work was done interior to the property, well within 20 feet of the property boundary. So there was no reason to move the camp across the street in accordance with the camp program. So everything was left on site. So all the data that we get back will be from on-site camp monitoring. So we were, very pleased. They were very forthright when we were out on the site on Saturday, with relaying to us what they were finding, and we relayed to them what we were finding. And, we were very pleased with the way the overall program went with respect to the performance of the investigation. So that's basically my report.
Laura, that's great. Thank you. I imagine there's some questions. So let's open this up first to the Community Board 1 members of the committee. Does anyone have a question for Laura about the BCP situation? Okay, looks like not. And in the attendee group, are there any questions?
Yes, please. If you have questions, you could use the raise hand button. If you can't find or use the raise hand button, please chat to the host. This is for the 250 Water Street Brownfield Cleanup Program.
Wow, this may be a first in the history of the Brownfield Cleanup Program, not to see any questions from any of the folks here. I do want to point that the 250 BCP website has all the documentation that Laura's referred to here, and it will also comes onto the Community Board 1 website. I think it's under external documents, as I recall. Correct me if I'm wrong, Diana.
Yes, that's correct. And it hadn't been updated for a while since we started sending out those notices and updates from Laura in the weekly newsletter. But everybody who's interested, I have just started updating it again. And we will be continuing to update it through the duration of the program. So I'll share the link. I know our website is very difficult to navigate, but I will share the link in the chat. So you could just bookmark it and know where that's the place to find Laura's updates. And we will also continue sending them via email.
All right, perfect.
Okay, well, I mean,
right.
it's
Yeah,
6:11. I'm going to
yeah, it's
just
good news.
ask one more. I don't see any. So I'm going to thank Laura. Thank you very much
right.
for all the hard work. And on behalf of the community and all those involved,
Yes.
many names I
Yes.
see here. Anything else,
Yes.
or we will move on to the next item? Okay. All right. Laura, thank you.
Perfect. All right, thanks, guys. I'll be circling back. As
Okay.
soon as I get the daily field reports, I'll forward them on and make sure you guys have them, okay?
Absolutely, and we will post
All
them
right, talk to you
accordingly.
soon.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye, thanks
Yes,
again.
absolutely. Okay.
Okay, bye-bye. So next on the agenda, that went pretty quickly, is a presentation by Bryce Weissmuller, the project manager from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the newly resurrected New York and New Jersey harbor and tributaries focus area feasibility study. I think, Bryce, you were here, we were talking about, my gosh, I guess 4 years ago. I can't believe it, but something a long time ago. I think this was under what, I'm not sure who was chair at the time, but in any case, we're delighted to have you back. We're all really interested to know what is going to be happening now. And I've asked Bryce to introduce his team and also to make sure that he really identifies lower Manhattan concerns and the West Side, something that we all talked about. And this is why we are delighted the Community Board 1 is well represented here, including with their own chair, Janine Kiley, welcome, and Will Benish, and I'm sure other names I'm sorry I'm not seeing here, but thank you all for showing up and for coming. I think there are also students here from Amy Chester, who's the head of Rebuild by Design. I think she has some students here from Syracuse University, and I think there are many other groups here from different community boards that are really interested to hear what the Army Corps will be providing. So without further ado on this topic of the agenda, thank you, Bryce.
Nonsense. Thank you for having us. I'm also joined tonight by Dr. Olivia Cackler, who's a section chief and the principal planner on this study in our planning division. So hopefully when I misspeak or forget to say something, she will correct me on it. I'm trying to share my screen now. Hopefully everybody can see the slide that's shown, title slide. It's a fairly short presentation today, just to run through things, and I will try to speak to specifics as it relates to downtown Manhattan on some of these slides, so the community board and the environmental committee kind of have a better feel for what's currently scoped or identified within the study. But there's a lot of things that are still in play and a lot of new information that we're hoping to bring to bear as we resume work on the study. This slide basically just is a summary of the overall study in one slide. The New York and New Jersey harbor and tributaries coastal storm risk management study was one of 9 focus area studies that came out of the North Atlantic Coast Comprehensive Study that was completed back in January 2015. It covers the entire tidally affected New York Harbor, which goes all the way up to Troy Lock and Dam on the Hudson River, and includes the Passaic, Hackensack, Rahway, Raritan, a number of rivers, Jamaica Bay, Newark Bay, Kills, East River, and Western Long Island Sound. A huge study area about the size of Rhode Island. The study got started in 2016. It's sponsored by the 2 states acting through the DEC in New York and DEP in New Jersey. And it's also being done in full partnership with New York City. The study's been underway since 2016, but in 2020 and 21, we did not receive any federal funding, so the study basically was on pause for approximately the last 2 years. The study was scoped early on to be 19.4 million, and as I mentioned, that's cost shared with the DEC and DEP. The only issue on the cost sharing is we did get some good news, 2 pieces of very good news this fiscal year. One is with the new administration, we were able to, including it in the president's budget for fiscal year 22, as well as it being included in both houses' appropriation bills for 22, we were able to receive continuing resolution funding in October. So we were able to resume the study a few months ago with that funding. And then following Hurricane Ida, the Disaster Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, DRSAA, that was passed last year, we received in the work plan that was released last month, 6.724 million. We haven't gotten guidance as to how that might change cost sharing. So that pretty much funds the remaining balance along with what's anticipated for this fiscal year 22. So hopefully going forward, we don't have any more snags as we have had these last 2 fiscal years. So that was very, very good news. Also, earlier last year, we were able to request and receive a second exemption from the Assistant Secretary of the Army to extend the study schedule. To go beyond 3 years, you have to get approval by the Assistant Secretary of the Army for civil work. So we had one originally, but with the 2-year pause because of lack of funding, we needed to get another one. So we got that earlier last year. And so we're pretty much on a green light now to resume the study. The alternatives that we have now are conceptual and are being, for lack of a better word, fleshed out now as we try to march on to our next milestone on the study, which is scheduled for later this spring and is referred to as the tentatively, and I can't stress that word enough, tentatively selected plan. So it's going to be our first plan that we think, and in coordination with the other federal agencies that we're partnered with, as well as our sponsors, best meets the coastal storm risk that still remains in the area, given that there have been a number of actions that have been done and are underway still to address coastal storm risk in the study area. And then following that milestone, we soon after will be releasing our draft report. So that's scheduled to be released in summer of this year. And then we'll have public meetings following that throughout a variety of locations around the area. So a lot of community outreach that we're looking to be doing this August and September time period. And another thing to point out on this slide also is that WRDA 2020, which is passed late in 2020, also had specific study language to this study as well as broadly for coastal storm risk management studies. So we're trying to factor in that new authority language to the study as we're prepared to get to the draft report, again, to be released later this year. A few points to mention. We're not sure what plan is going to be selected yet by any means, and that's a decision that our higher authority offices make. But it does look to be something that's going to be layered. In other words, it's not going to be any single solution. The base solution for everywhere is certainly that we want better education and outreach for what coastal storm risk exists in the area. That's whether you're behind a levee, a flood wall, or not. There's a lot of risk that's out there, and it's not just from what we can manage from water resources as a Corps of Engineers. You know, down power lines killed a lot of people following Hurricane Sandy in this area, down trees, a lot of things. So making sure that not just the federal government, state, local governments, but the populace at large is better aware of those risks and can manage them when the storm is bearing down on the region is by far the most important and first layer of that plan. And then from there, it's a number of actions that we have, and those actions aren't the same in any one area. There's a variety of different approaches for different areas, and it'll be layered for those different areas as best we think in terms of trying to maximize the bang for buck in the plan that we come up with. That's kind of the primary formulation approach that we take is to try to maximize the federal dollars that are spent by addressing as many damages as we can per dollar spent. And then it's also going to be a phased approach. There's going to be short-term things that we can do now, mid-term things that need a lot more study and evaluation before they can actually be constructed, and then long-term plan items for things that need to be adapted in the future, given that there's a lot of uncertainty in the future related to sea level rise and climate change. So that's kind of the overall study on one slide. Now, this slide, I apologize, is showing primarily where storm surge gates. That's been one of the more controversial features within the HAT study so far. There's a number of shoreline-based measures that aren't shown here, notably in downtown Manhattan. For downtown Manhattan consideration in terms of these alternatives, it's important to say that, you know, there's a couple alternatives, alternative 3A and alternative 2, that would address severe coastal storm risk with storm surge barriers, either on the Verrazano Narrows or the outer transect area. The outer transect area, that plan does not fare well, very well economically, and you'll see that on some of the subsequent slides. But alternative 3A does, as well as 3B and 4. 3B and 4, which do not have gates on the Verrazano Narrows or on the transect, do have recommendations for completing the Big U in terms of a shoreline-based measure in downtown Manhattan. And either that feature in alternative 3B and 4, as well as 5, I should say, has a very good benefit to cost ratio, large net benefits, which is good. And we also have and are developing for alternatives 3A and 2, where that severe coastal storm risk in downtown Manhattan would be addressed by those storm surge gates. We're also looking at trying to identify for the high-risk areas, like around the end of Canal Street on the west side, where there might need to be some residual risk features to address the situation where you have a coastal storm hitting, but the gates wouldn't be closed for it because it's not a severe enough storm. So there's also shoreline measures that are being fleshed out for that now. So this map right now is showing the storm surge gates, again, because of the controversy that they've had previously and their complexity, frankly. But also there's going to be a number of structural measures along the shorelines throughout the study area, and notably in downtown Manhattan. We've been coordinating also, I should say, with the city pretty well, because they've been marching on very well with trying to advance plans for the East Side Resiliency Project and then the Two Bridges area, and have, as early as last month, come out with new plan documents related to the financial district and leading down towards the Battery. So we're looking forward to kind of resuming that conversation with them and trying to make sure that the plan that we have for more or less completing the Big U concept in alternative 3B, 4, and 5 meshes well with what their current plans are for that region. So just to get back to the costs, as I was mentioning, the net cost, which is, again, one of the primary drivers, you can see for alternative 2. I should point out too, I apologize, alternative 1 is the no action alternative. And so this is actually something we're actively looking to update right now. This is basically what is the future going to be in this study area without this study. So we're assuming a lot of the actions that the city has planned, like I said, for the east side along the East River there in downtown Manhattan kind of go forward. Where that stops and then where we need to pick up, we need to coordinate with the city. But the idea is to come up with a plan that pretty well dovetails, not just with what the city's plan are there, but then what other plans are by the states, as well as the Corps and then other federal agencies throughout the whole study area. So it's basically trying to lay the groundwork. And that's a critical first step in the study, just because that provides a basis for comparison of what our plan would do versus what that no action plan would be. As you can see, alternative 2, as I mentioned, the outer harbor surge gate, that very, very large surge gate structure, does not fare very well economically, much less environmentally, not getting into that realm at least, compared to the middle 3 alternatives. Those actually fare very well. and are fairly close. Some have some issues here or there, but for downtown Manhattan, you can be assured that at this point, it looks very likely that either a Verizon Narrows gate with residual risk features or just completing the big U in terms of structural shoreline-based measure will likely be, I would think, in the tentatively selected plan. And again, it's primarily just because those three plans fare so well. Or an alternative 5 that also has, even though it has the lowest cost and addresses the smallest area, it also has a very strong benefit to cost ratio, although the net benefits are fairly low compared to those middle three. And these costs, I should all say, are based on old estimates that we had. As we were winding down the study because of the lack of funding back in 2020, we just got a slew of relatively new draft information from various consultants working for us. So we will be looking to get a lot of updates on the cost and benefits as we get closer to the tentatively selected plan later this spring and summer. So a lot of these numbers are going to change. I think some dramatically. So I think alternative 2, which hasn't fared well economically and has by far the longest lifespan in terms of the time it takes to construct. The estimates that we had from the consultant have that actually being even a little bit higher. Very large structure there. And even alternative 3A has a very long time period for construction compared to the other three alternatives that we have here. A sixth alternative that we might have is a non-structural only, which is a requirement for flood risk studies that we have now, but it's not necessarily for coastal storm risk studies. So we will be developing for all of these alternatives a lot of non-structural measures to include with them, but they may not be to the same level of design effort because these right now are all being designed to more or less what we have as the 100-year storm or the 1% probability per year storm, which is for a lot of the study area comparable to what Hurricane Sandy was. The next storm, of course, will not be Hurricane Sandy, and other areas will be hit severely. And that next storm may not happen for another decade, may not happen for 50 years. It could happen this year. It's very important to bear in mind that these storms are based on very long data analyses, and these kind of storms can happen. You can have like in Ellicott, Maryland, they had two 500-year storms, I want to say, within 2 or 3 years. Statistically, those kind of events can happen. So while I hope Hurricane Sandy or a storm like that never happens for a very long time, it very well could happen. And as sea level rise continues to occur, it'll make whatever storm hits that much worse. So one of the things that we identified after we released our interim report, which was released back in February 2019, was there were a lot of things that we still needed to evaluate to kind of get to the tentatively selected plan. So when the study was kind of winding down as of February 2020, these were the items that we had on our list. Looking at other sea level rise scenarios, and it looks like the high projection sea level rise causes an amazingly increased amount of damages to this region. So if anyone is concerned about sea level rise, good, you should be. It concerns me quite a bit. Even though we may not see it for decades, the time to plan for it is now. The period of analysis that we had, we've just gotten some new guidance from our headquarters office on this, so that's going to affect the formulation a little bit, trying to take into account a little bit more so those projects that take a long time to construct, more or less trying to set a base year that takes into account that having projects that can be implemented quicker are better. Nobody wants to wait decades to try to have the protection from the severe storms. Expand the benefit analysis. We had done some of that with the interim report with some of the GIS that we had done. This is basically going beyond what we typically identify as our national economic development or NED benefits, looking at the other benefits, critical infrastructure, life safety risks, disadvantaged communities. There's a lot of other considerations that come into this, and we're going to try to quantify those as best we can. As we did in the interim report with the GIS analysis, that analysis more or less tracked with what the economic analysis that we had, but it does help to highlight some of the more critical elements, infrastructure being one, of course. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking to identify a lot more shoreline-based measures. These are more going to be targeted towards frequent and moderate storms, maybe not the more severe storms, as well as non-structural measures. So I mentioned a layered approach earlier. So the first layer being a good education, evacuation plan for all the communities in this area. But then underneath that, it's going to be not just the structural measures that we're talking about, either surge gates or shoreline-based measures, but then non-structural measures as well. And then there's also going to be a phasing with how those get implemented over time, and then possibly adapted over time as it goes on. The operational assumptions that we have. Storm surge gates are the benefits that you can claim from them is very dependent upon how often you can operate or assume to operate the storm surge gates. You can't close them for just any storm. It has to, if you're big gates and on a main shipping channel, you need to close them more for the more moderate or severe storms, because otherwise you're impacting navigation to the point below it. And that has a huge impact on the formulation, as we've seen between those conceptual alternatives I talked about earlier. Navigation, we had done a lot of coordination with the Coast Guard and the various pilot interests in the port, and are looking to continue with that. We have done a lot of refined hydrodynamic modeling, and we'll need to do a lot more of this as the study advances, to the extent that there are any in-water features in the plan that we identify in advance. Real estate, of course, in this region costs a huge amount. So those shoreline-based measures, to the extent that those are in these more urbanized area, that becomes a very particular challenge. And then, of course, there's also environmental and cultural issues, mitigation costs, hazardous and HTRW type issues. Some of the areas that we have identified have those kind of problems within them. Interior drainage, how best to deal with that. Downtown Manhattan, as many people on the committee probably know, the existing projects that have been advanced by the city to try to deal with the coastal storm risk along the east side of downtown Manhattan have pretty much pushed the interior drainage and stormwater and sewage treatment systems to the brink. So how we deal with that as we complete the Big U is a big issue that we have to work with. And that same issue applies to a lot of other areas as well. And then cost refinements based on the updates that we had gotten from the consultant as the study was winding down. So there's a lot of pieces in play. I mentioned sea level rise being a big uncertainty and going out into the future. This chart, and I apologize for some of the graphics here, but just to explain, the three curves that you see here with the red, blue, and brown dots are the Corps' projections for the battery. It changes based on location, but they're all generally similar to this. The few dots that you see with shading behind them, either brown or red, are either New Jersey or New York and New York City's projections going out into the future. You can see theirs are a little bit more, I guess, concerning, a little higher than the Corps'. But when you're out there in the 2100 time period, the difference is about 10 years from when they might see sea level rise of about 6 feet from when we would see 6 feet of sea level rise in our projection. So it's important to note that these are projections. We don't assign probabilities to them, but I know New Jersey has, and I think possibly New York also in their projections. So far, it's worth noting, and all these projections all go back to 1992 as a starting point, that the actual data, which is the squiggly red line at the bottom left, has actually been tracking, at least as of a few years ago, closest to the intermediate projection, which is good. Certainly hate to see it break out to the high projection, but that could occur this year or next year. Sea level rise is hard to measure on a decade basis, much less on a yearly or anything more refined than that. And you can see it does vary quite a bit. So as I mentioned earlier, the damages just go up, and based on the Corps' it's called HEC FDA model. It's basically a damage model that assesses damages with and without the project. It's what we use to kind of look at how the benefits are for the different plans. That the damages that we would see in 2030 are, you know, in the $3.5 billion range, and that goes up just from the intermediate based projection about threefold to a little over 9 billion, and then under the high projection it goes up to 50 billion. So the amount of real estate, property, structures, homes, businesses that are going to be at risk as time goes on, particularly if sea level rise starts going more towards the high projection, is just very, very sobering. So to the extent that things can be done now, I think that would be just super. Of course, we have to kind of deal with it on the result end of it, our agency. So we are trying to plan for that. Our economic analysis for the study is done over 50 years, although we are looking at a 100-year planning horizon. So we are trying to assess it. And the importance of that is making sure that whatever we come up with is adaptable. Because if we do build something to the intermediate projection, we want to make sure that if and when sea level rise starts breaking more towards the high projection, that whatever has been put in place does not have to be fully rebuilt, but just can be adapted to accommodate the increased risk as that occurs into the future. This kind of shows the importance of the operation of the surge gates and the different alternatives. The difference between the purple and the yellow basically are the net benefits that you see, whether you can operate the gates for more or less a frequent storm, which is the 50% annual exceedance probability, the 2-year storm event, for lack of a better term, versus the 10-year storm event. So we think that the larger gates that are on the main shipping channels, which are basically 2, 3A, and 3B, operating those for a 2-year storm event would have a pretty large impact on the port. So while they may have the highest benefits, net benefits, under the purple or the 2-year storm event condition, we don't think those are very reasonable in terms of the impact, not just on navigation, but then also the environment, of course, as well. So it's for that reason that we're thinking more that 3B and 4 might bear out in some variation of it. But and again, in those alternatives, 3B, 4, and 5, we complete the Big U in downtown Manhattan. So there's a lot of environmental considerations that are trying to be done right now as we are getting to the tentatively selected plan. The NEPA document that we're doing for this is the process that basically allows for the longest time period of evaluation and the greatest amount of interaction with other agencies and the public. It's a tiered NEPA document, so we're going to be coming up with a Tier 1 draft EIS. And what that means is for any of the features that we identify in our plan, we will have a final Tier 1 EIS, but then after we make a recommendation on the study, there'll have to be a whole Tier 2 EIS process after the study is completed for those very complex features, because we do recognize that there will need a lot more time, a lot more data collection and evaluation to be able to get those to address a lot of these issues that we have identified here. And they apply pretty much on every alternative, and quite a few of the features in each alternative hit on many of these topics. So there's a lot of environmental evaluation that has to be done and will continue well past this study. Getting to the study schedule, as I mentioned, we have our tentatively selected plan in May, and we will have our draft feasibility report and Tier 1 EIS scheduled for release in July. So the public meetings, and I hope we have some in downtown Manhattan, as we have had previously on the study, we'd be shooting for in August and September. So I believe that's the end of my slide. So love to answer any questions that I can. Probably won't be able to answer all of them because there's a lot of questions that we don't know yet.
Bryce, thank you so much for the presentation. I just want to ask, does Dr. Kackler have anything to add here, or is that the full presentation?
Yeah, I think Bryce did a nice overview I'm
Sorry?
sure that Bryce did a great overview. He blew through a lot of he went through a lot of information very quickly. I am anticipating that you will have a lot of questions about the terms that we use. You know, maybe 30 to 50% of what we use is specific to our agency. So please ask away. For instance, non-structural. I'd never heard the term non-structural until I came to work for the Army Corps. The distinction between a structural plan and a non-structural. Structural, we actually change the frequency and the severity of the flooding, you know, by diverting the water, storing it, or blocking it. Under a non-structural plan, we let the floodwaters come, but what we do is we try to get the people and the property out of the way by either elevating their structures or buying them out or floodproofing their structures. Floodproofing their properties, for instance. So that's what Bryce was alluding to by this sixth plan that wasn't on that chart. And the reason it wasn't on that chart is that requirement did not exist for us when we started this study. You know, so that's another thing that the Army Corps does have to keep up with, which is that as new requirements come online, if they were good enough to implement for the agency, then it means that every study that is not yet complete has to figure out some way to fold this in and explain how we're going to deal with it. But yes, we have many other terms and we are here to answer any questions that we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. Okay, I'm surprised I don't see any hands up, but let's start with our committee, the Environmental Protection Committee of CB1. We'll start there and then go from there. So Bob Schneck, welcome.
So this is a very big step forward for everyone, and so it's a very, very important thing that this has been achieved and it's on the way. One thing I've wondered about since the beginning is the comprehensiveness. This is an area as big as, you say, the state of Rhode Island. Does this actually mean that you're going to attempt to have solutions to all of the storm surge and tidal change related problems for that whole area? Is that the plan?
Yeah, yes, it is.
And then the other thing the other major line question I have is, this stuff is going to cost a monumental or astronomical, maybe is the right word, amount of money. And so how does the funding work out for this? And how does the federal, does your work have a follow-on from the federal government, or does the city of New York fight for money and the state of New York? How does, once you have the plan for something as big as the state of Rhode Island in place, how does that proceed into reality?
That's a very good question. By law, we're not supposed to consider the availability of funding when we come up with our plans. We're supposed to come up with an ideal plan which makes reasonable assumptions on what can be done from a construction perspective, from environmental compliance, but the amount of funding that's available is not a consideration when coming up with a plan. That being said, of course, these alternatives are huge. There's a number of moving parts to each one. So whether there's going to be sufficient sponsor funding from the states or the city. Generally, the states look to have local sponsors pay some of the non-federal share when we construct our projects. And for that matter, whether there's sufficient federal funding. This study itself, which is a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of these projects themselves to construct, received a 2-year stall in federal funding. So it's a very legitimate concern. Our initial plan that we come up with is tentative and does not take that into account. But certainly as we advance that plan and finally make recommendations and then look to advance things actually into further design and then construction, there are going to be a lot of items that can be implemented separately, we anticipate. And so the lowest hanging fruit, the ones that have the greatest interest at the local level, at the sponsor level, and have support from Congress, most notably, will likely be the ones that get advanced first. But goal is to come up with a comprehensive plan for what could be done And then hopefully we get to implement as much of that as there is support and funding will allow. Once we make a recommendation to Congress, that's all we do, I should say too. And that comes from our chief of engineers in Washington to Congress. Then it's up to them to whether they want to give us an authorization to build it. And then of course, after the authorization, whether they want to fund it. So all we do at the study level in the Corps of Engineers is just make recommendations. We don't make decisions on what actually gets done.
So my final question is, what can our community board one doing going forward to track this and to support the final outcome of actually doing something about the really immense impact of climate change in the whole region and in Lower Manhattan?
Well, we would be very much welcoming any critiques, comments, questions. When we go through our draft review process, that really helps to inform our decision making and the further evaluations that we do as we refine that draft plan to come up with the final one. And then ultimately, once we get to the recommendation stage, reaching out to your federal elected officials is always a good idea. Reaching out to the non-federal sponsors to make sure that they're aware. We share all the comments that we receive with them, as well as with our higher authority offices. So ultimately, Congress can give us authority, but really, I like to think of us as a service agency in this regard when it comes to our civil works projects. We are trying to address a problem that's been identified to us by the two states. They're the sponsors, and if anything is going to be implemented, it will be at them, at their request and with their support. And of course, for any actions in Community Board 1, New York City support as well.
Thank you, Bryce.
Thanks very much. I'm going to ask for Christopher Marte. Thanks very much, Councilman Marte, or his office, whoever is behind that screen.
Hey, it's me.
Oh, terrific. Welcome.
Of course, no, it was a great presentation. And Bob actually asked my question in his last question, but I just want to say thank you for being here. It's truly exciting and relieving too, to know that we're back studying this. There's the funding committed by all the chambers that need to give the green light on this. And as Bob said, we're happy to help, especially on the community outreach front. All of us here want this to be successful and as quickly as possible. And so feel free to use my office. I'm sure the community board as partners moving forward. But thank you again for sharing so much information today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much, Councilmember Marte. We have to thank you for this and for appearing at so many different events and on so many different issues. It is really extraordinary, and we're delighted that you're on board on this one as well. Okay, I have Richard Corman from the committee.
Thank you, Alice. And of course, I underscore what Councilmember Marte said. We're here. This is all very incredibly important to all of us. And that's why we're on this committee, amongst other reasons. I have a few questions, and I really firstly appreciate the fact that this is, of course, underway. My first one has to do with sea level rise, and perhaps I misunderstood. I had a different, an incorrect understanding in the past, but I thought that this project was not permitted to address sea level rise at one point. Was that true, and has it changed, or was it simply my misunderstanding?
It's a nuanced answer, so if it sounds confusing, I apologize. It is confusing. The study authority that we had been using goes back to 1955. And so our regulations have for the past several decades required us to incorporate sea level rise as we evaluate coastal storm risks. So we were including coastal storm or sea level rise in our analyses previously on the study. But the authority did not explicitly identify sea level rise that we had. Now, one of those provisions that was in Order 2020 made it explicit. So We had been evaluating it previously, and we will be continuing to evaluate it. The one open question is how to deal with sea level rise when it's causing flooding in and of itself, which occurs now in areas like Broad Channel in Jamaica Bay, where you can see streets being flooded just from a spring tide once or twice a month. So our analysis is trying to get at coastal storm risk as the primary issue, but sea level rise certainly makes that worse. And the goal is to come up with plans that we can put in place for at least the severe storms, moderate storms, or at worst, the frequent storms, so that sea level rise in and of itself does not become an issue. Broad Channel is the poster child for what letting a problem go too far. So we want to hopefully come up with plans that can look more forward to the future, that have adaptive capabilities within them. So as sea level rise gets worse, or maybe doesn't get as worse, hopefully, we can make changes as needed going forward in time.
Thank you. That's,
Right.
I'm encouraged to at least now completely understand that sea level rise is certainly deeply within the thinking of this project. So that's the essence of what I got from your answer, and it's truly what I want to hear. Another question I have: how are you incorporating the mitigation projects that are currently either underway or planned by the city within the scope of this project? I have, for example, been part of I guess we called it a walk shop for Battery Park City, and I asked them during that walk shop, would your plans change if we were going to have storm surge barriers? And the answer was yes, but they can't plan for that.
Sure. The alternative one that I mentioned basically is trying to identify it, and I should say the federal agencies have, following Hurricane Sandy, been meeting regularly and have amassed a large database of different projects that are by other federal agencies, the Corps of Engineers, of course, as well as the city and the two states, actions that address resilience or coastal storm risk in some form or fashion. So one of the key items that we're doing as we're resuming the study now is kind of going back through that list. We basically have to make a cutoff of any of the projects that we think are permitted and have a relatively certain funding stream by, I believe we're using our agency decision milestone as the breakoff point, which right now is at the end of 2022 into 2023. So any projects that don't have permits or have a certain funding stream are not assumed to go in place. So those may become features that we more or less endorse as part of our plan, or they might become something that we assume to go in place. So there is potential for redundancy amongst different projects with some of our plans. And so areas where projects are planned, either by other projects by the Corps or by other agencies, like the East Side Resiliency Project. We're not claiming any damages being reduced from what we would be doing, because that's a project that's already assumed to be in place as part of that without project condition. So we're trying to dovetail our plan. This plan is trying to be more or less a safety net to the region, because there have been so many other projects being done or have been done by our agency and others. So it gets really kind of more fine line when there are other actions, like the city has plans for the financial district, the Two Bridges area in downtown Manhattan, and whether they have sufficient funding and permits in place where we can say, yeah, that's a sure thing that's going to be in place regardless of what we do going into the future, versus projects that might be different depending on what we come up with. So it's just trying to come up with the plan that best dovetails.
Thank you again. Alice, just two more quick questions, I think. Dr. Tackler mentioned and explained the structural versus non-structural components. Are they, what you present typically seem to be discrete projects, 1, 2, 3A, 3B, etc. But these non-structural things seem to apply across most, if not all of the projects. Are you going to incorporate those non-structural recommendations in all of the recommendations that you include?
Yes.
Mr. Corman, yes, we, any recommendation we make is going to include a substantial non-structural component, because the shoreline-based measures that Bryce was describing, they're very large. I don't know if that's come across in our public meetings to date, but they are somewhere between 10 and 20 feet high above grade. And there are not always going to be enough structures behind those shoreline-based measures to be cost justified. And so for those areas, we're going to be looking at non-structural, which could consist of elevations or floodproofing, or this is sensitive matter buyouts. But non-structural can also consist of smaller localized flood walls that are not on the water, a little bit set back. So that's another wrinkle. I would also like to just piggyback. You didn't ask this one, but in addition to a non-structural component, wherever it is possible, we're looking to include natural and nature-based features throughout the estuary in the form of wetlands or submerged aquatic vegetation. We do have to caveat, though, that it is very difficult because the harbor is so built up that the best locations for that are in Jamaica Bay and the Hackensack Meadowlands. Elsewhere in the estuary, they typically tend to be too high velocity to support them, but we're going to try to fit them in wherever we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you again. I think I'll move on.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Last person from our committee, Wendy Chapman, co-chair. Hi, Wendy. Thanks.
Hi, thanks. This was a great presentation, and the questions so far have been great. You know, one of the things that we learned about the Big U is that it was really designed to be kind of right on the edge of the water and not really the bathtub that goes down deep. And the other studies have now decided, you know, certainly in the financial district, that they need to go into the water and they need to go down very far, hopefully to bedrock, but in some cases that's not possible. I think when you were originally doing the study, we were hearing more that that Canal Street would definitely be included in any plan. I think that in 2019, if I remember, that we were in the 1 or 3% top cost benefit analysis. And I'm thinking about how narrow it is there at Canal Street on the Hudson River Park. Is this is your study, because the other thing, it sounds like to me, you're doing something that can get funded quickly and put in place quickly and lock it down. And as we know, if you go into the water, which if you have to go up, 15, 20 feet or whatever it is, I mean, I don't know how you do that at Canal Street. So are you looking to go into the water, or is this too complicated to take that on? Or do you have to do, minimum viable project? I mean, I'm just curious as to, or is it not that refined yet?
Well, to date, our cost estimates have been largely based on parametrics. We do have a lot, which is basically a scaled cost to the linear feet and the type of urbanization that exists in an area. And the city, I think, has the last 2 years when we've been on pause, has advanced a lot of their studies. So I think there's a lot of information that we can pick up and learn from the city as they work to further advance the East Side Resiliency Project and some of these others. I don't know that the approach that the city has for the financial district building out into the water is the best approach for that area. Just because I know they have a lot of very good engineers and scientists, I would kind of assume that to be the case, but I think our team wants to dig in a little bit deeper on that. But there are a few approaches that where you can have a raised promenade built on piles going out into the water. There are ways of getting around these kind of challenges in these very constrained areas. But to say that we have every block and every linear foot of the Big U concept worked out, would be a vast overstatement. Right now, we've tried to come up with what we think are really reasonable cost estimates, very high cost estimates for that area, but given the amount of critical infrastructure and high risk that exists throughout downtown Manhattan, it's fortunate enough to have sufficient damages that can be avoided if we do something, even at those high costs, to justify or warrant doing something. So, like
Absolutely.
I said earlier, we'll be making recommendations for doing something there, but we don't have all the details as to what exactly that will be for every block. That's those further evaluations.
Certainly, I understand, but one of the things that we're learning too is that the combined sewer overflow is a big issue there, and
Yes.
the sea level rise is going to very much mess with the directional outflows. And so that would actually mean rebuilding the city's sewer systems in part, or at least putting one-way locks. And is that all being built into your model too, or is that something that comes later?
That's something that we need to discuss in a little bit more detail with the city as to how they see the plan that they have for the financial district. As I understood it, when we had our last meeting with them, which has been a while now since we've been on pause, that they were looking to advance and put in some more wastewater treatment systems, pump stations, basically, to get the material over to Newtown Creek wastewater treatment facility. So how much they see is kind of being something that would be an interior drainage feature that they would need to be doing anyway versus what is needed because of the project that we'd be looking to advance to address the coastal storm risk. It kind of just comes into how much of those costs fold into our benefit cost analysis, and then when it comes to implementation, is it something that is funded on a car shared basis with us, or is it something the city would have to do at 100% their cost to implement it? Those are the kind of details that we don't have worked out right now. The actions that have been advanced for that area have been primarily led by our regulatory office. So when it's a regulatory action, it's kind of outside the civil works arena, and we kind of let that process play out. And however that
regulatory, because it's in the water, is that why?
Yes, the Corps of Engineers regulates the waters of the United States. So,
and as we know, that's a state park. It's it's protected wetlands, not wetlands, but Richard, help me out. What do you call it? The creatures in the water are state protected. So is that the regulatory?
It's a sanctuary.
Thank you.
Marine sanctuary.
Thank you.
sure. So
okay, so you're waiting on that.
Yeah, well, I would say that we would want to be careful not to in any way interfere with or affect that ongoing regulatory process that is being done with our agency. Olivia and I work on civil works projects, and I think both Olivia and I can attest that we try not to in any way mess with the regulatory actions that any non-federal entities, in this case, the city, may be discussing with our regulatory office.
Well, I mean, and we don't need to go into too much detail, but many of us have listened to a lot of plans over the years, over and over again. And one of the things that we have thought at times is to raise the roads, raise the streets. And, that area is so narrow. No one knows the right answer exactly. So that's what I'm really interested in terms of. This is going to be a complicated problem, and I don't know how much authority the federal study has to go inland to actually talk to the Department of Transportation to raise the streets, or if you really have to keep it right on the edge, or you have to go into the water. Like I'm curious in terms of what oversight you have on that, or because you're the federal government, you make the recommendation about what should happen, and that's kind of the heavy, that's what needs to happen. I mean, I'm not quite sure who defers to who, and then of course who pays for it is a big deal.
I'm not sure I know the answers to those questions myself.
And that is the biggest problem that we have over and over and over again in the city. decisions get made because one agency doesn't want to interfere with another agency. And sometimes that's not always the best decision. That makes sense.
It makes sense. We're trying to come up with a plan that takes everything into account. So we're trying to be comprehensive in our plan, but whether the city is coming to the New York District as a non-federal partner on the civil work study, which they are, or whether the city is approaching our regulatory office saying we would like a permit to do some fill into the East River and the financial district area because we think it's critically necessary. Those two processes, to be objective and to not taint each other, need to be kept separate and distinct. So that's a coordination that we have to do within our district, but it's not something that both offices can lead. When it's a regulatory action, it means that Olivia and I will take whatever information they can share with us and fold it into our plan. But we're not going to tell them what they should be doing.
I think that's what I'm worried about, which I understand that you can't tell them what they're going to do, but we've also seen that everyone doesn't want to step on each other's toes, and there's delay and delay and delay, or just inaction. And, you know, we see it more on the city and state level, but it's, I mean, and truly we understand how complicated it is. And we have relied on our local elected officials to thread that needle many times and bring the various agencies together to talk and work it out with we, the public, kind of pushing. And your project has always felt very far away for us. And so as soon as it gets more tangible, many of us are going to want to know a lot of detail really quickly. And if you talk to the Battery Park project, I think you would hear from them that we have been highly involved in details that you'd be surprised with. So if we can do that, we'd love to be a partner with you, is what I'm saying. And I know it's too early, but when it is appropriate, I think that you'll be surprised with our level of engagement. And I'll stop there now.
I think we will welcome that.
Thanks, Wendy. I think Wendy's hit upon a critical point for Community Board 1 and all the community boards, is that it isn't something that should be happening later. It's been going on for years. It's critical that the Corps gets involved with the city and state agencies now, in meetings now. And these are, you know, critical civil works on all scales, on all sides of the islands. And it has got to start to become much more cohesive exploration. Anyway, I didn't mean to jump in, but I'm going to call on folks from outside the committee now. So I see Kate Boycott, formerly from the Waterfront Alliance, now Director of Climate Resilient Coast and Watersheds from the Environmental Defense Fund. Thanks so much, Kate, for being here.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. But also great to see you, Bryce and Olivia, and was really interested to hear more about some of the expansion of non-structural measures and multi-layered phased approach, and really thinking, you see some of the thinking through about integrating with some of the projects the city already has, which is really positive, and looking forward to seeing more of that. I have sort of two questions related to where the risk analysis and the economic benefits come together, which is a part that we're sort of diving into, and just sort of building off of, I think, Richard's comment earlier, and your point about the Water Resources Development Act of 2020, which we worked very hard to pass with expanded language. Wondering first how, and just for context for everybody in the committee, one of the challenges that a lot of advocates have been looking into is trying to figure out how, when we're thinking about multiple options to build or not build to address flooding, that we are thinking about multiple types of flooding, whether that be storm surge, tidal flooding, which is the sea level rise point that Richard brought up, and then also storms like Ida, to the extent feasible, individually and together, so that we're really making sure that from an economic perspective, as well as sort of all the social perspectives, that we're making the decision that makes the best, most sense from getting the most bang for our buck here. And that has been a challenge both technically and authorization wise, and we do feel like we were able to expand that authorization in law to enable some of that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of how we're thinking about these multiple hazards, what the opportunities are there. And then secondly, related to that, we have seen some really creative, maybe at a later stage, ways that the Nassau County Back Bay's study has incorporated critical infrastructure into some of their economic analysis. So this is a way to sort of get a little bit more equity potentially by better valuing some of these critical infrastructure pieces that we rely on into that cost benefit analysis. I'm curious if those are things you're thinking about and sort of if you can speak to them today. Thank you so much.
Sure. I might be okay on the first answer, but I'll probably defer to Dr. Kathryn on that second one, since she kind of oversees the economics and has a much better handle on how we evaluate the what we refer to as the other registers. When it comes to the coastal storm risk and the water resources associated with it, this area has certainly seen a fair share of, within this last decade, very terrible examples of different types. And unfortunately, they do mix very well when it comes to coastal storms between the surge that can occur, the sea level rise that carries the surge in, as well as the rainfall and the interior drainage problems. Hurricane Sandy was notable in that it had very little rainfall for the area as compared to a lot of prior coastal storms like Hurricane Irene, of course, but it's quite possible you could have that occur coincident in the next storm that happens. So we are trying to address them from a life safety and a damages standpoint. Certainly storm surge, and this is broadly to the eastern Atlantic seaboard. Storm surge has the greatest threat for life safety as well as the greatest amount of damages, but it can be very much exacerbated. As I showed on the graphic, sea level rise alone on the high projection causes a five-fold increase in damages going out into the future. And that's just from the 6 feet of the sea level rise that is in that high projection by the year 2100. So we are trying to evaluate all those different scenarios, and we're trying to come up with a reasonable plan that best addresses what we know are the coastal storm risks of today, the Hurricane Sandy type storm events that can occur. Although infrequent, they do a severe amount of damage, of course, as we all know. But then also how whatever we put in place today can be adapted in the future for however the sea level rise changes, whether it stays on an intermediate projection, which it seems to have been over the last 20 or 30 years since the projection started, or if it breaks more towards a high projection and we need to do more shoreline-based measures over a broader area or adapt the ones that have been put in place to make them higher and a broader area. So that's a very complicated question when it comes into the rainfall and precipitation effects between trying to distinguish what are overwhelmed storm drainage systems, which are locally typically a local responsibility, versus what are kind of riverine type flood impacts from those rainfall events, because that is something that we do try to factor into. And to the extent that any of our features exacerbate or make worse the interior drainage capabilities that exist within different areas, we try to adapt those systems to increase their capacity because of the features that we put in place. So that gets a bit very detail specific as to what location, what are the features that we're looking to do there, and what can the existing system accommodate versus what has to be expanded and adapted. So unfortunately, again, I don't have all the answers, but we are trying to take all of those factors into place. Sorry, Kate. In terms of the evaluating the other registers, Olivia, you might be better to kind of speak to how we might be getting at that as we get to our draft report.
Sure, thanks, Bryce. So we've always been required to talk about the other 3 registers aside from national economic development. That's regional economic development. So let's take a step back. National economic development is basically treating our GDP like a pie. We're trying to grow the pie. Regional economic development, the pie stays the same size, but we're talking about the transfer of benefits from one region to another. And that typically comes when there's a lot of construction activity and people maybe relocate. I'm not sure, Bryce. I think it comes more for navigation studies.
Yeah.
We almost never use that one. There's other social effects, which speaks to items such as quality of life, socially vulnerable populations, and also life safety considerations. That is one that the Army Corps has been working really hard to quantify so that it makes it easier to include in our discussions. And there's also environmental quality, which I think we try very hard to address. Typically, that's our biologists and our cultural resources and our HRW specialists. And we do a lot of it through the compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act. So that's just the background. What's been happening is in a lot of our feasibility reports up to this point, because we didn't have an approved way to quantify these other 3 accounts aside from the NED, we were doing it in a qualitative manner with a table. We might say positive effect, negative effect, neutral. And the space bar mutes me. So what we found out in January of 2021, while this study was on hiatus, was that the Assistant Secretary to the Army said, you are now going to do a more comprehensive accounting of benefits. You will quantify them. They didn't tell us how though. So, but we are gonna come up with some way to quantify it. So Kate, the report that you referenced, Nassau County Back Bays, that was produced after that direction came out. So that's what you're seeing in that report. And yes, we are definitely tracking that. I do want to tie this back to, so on this specific study, we were thinking to use that GIS-based analysis that was documented in the interim report, February 2019. We're trying to tie the effects to specific locations on the maps and use populations and structures and as our units basically to get a sense of the magnitude of the potential benefit. And we're looking to refine that. And what we would like to do is be able to share the information we've been working on, not just in a report format, because to be honest, very few people are going to sit through and read all 800 pages of our report. But we think we might be able to get a more constructive dialogue if we post it online so that it's more of an interactive format so that you can put in, I am interested in this particular species. So let's prioritize that and see if it changes the result, for instance. So we are going to have some form of quantification for those other 3 accounts. What we're trying to figure out is to what level of detail we have to work it in. I did look at the Nassau County Back Bays report, specifically for their highly vulnerable areas, HVA, we love our acronyms, and how they tie into the critical infrastructure. So what we've done typically in the past down in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina was we accounted for the physical value of the infrastructure. So, you know, the actual replacement of, say, train tracks or oil storage tanks, but that's just like the immediate, that's the material. That doesn't tell you anything about the secondary and tertiary effects, like what happens when those oil tanks are out of commission and you can't get gas for 2 weeks, like what happened after Sandy, or the subway infrastructure is damaged and that cuts off you know, people's livelihoods and also social connections and, you know, just basically the community's lifeblood. So we still need to work on that. We're planning to draw on the information that's been developed through New Orleans from Katrina and also Galveston District to work on Southwest Coastal. I think we can share that link with the community board so you can see what we're trying to achieve. You know, it's a GIS, it's a spatial format, it's easier to visualize. So I think that was way more answer than you wanted, and now you're going to try not to ask me any more questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Kate. Are you good there? Did you have any
We'll
follow-up?
always spend more time on Valentine's Day with the core, but I appreciate the answer and that's super helpful. I'm looking forward to following up. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to move to Community Board 2. Will Banesh from Community Board 2's Waterfront and Parks Committee has been following all of this closely. Thanks, Will, for being here.
Thanks, Alice. Thanks for inviting us. And Bryce and Dr. Kackler, thank you so much for coming.
I'll be right back. I apologize. My computer battery is running low. 30 seconds. Olivia, please answer questions.
Yeah, can you call me Olivia? Because Dr.
Sorry,
Kackler
Olivia.
is like
Yes.
strange. Okay, thank you.
I mean, it might, I don't know if we can wait 20 seconds for him to come back, because I feel like this is a question for both of you.
Certainly can wait. We can all take a moment's break. Thanks for the patience. And anyone who has already asked the question and is done, just go ahead, lower your hand. And anyone that hasn't, please go ahead and raise your hand so we can see what's ahead. It looks like we're coming to the end here. Thanks.
I don't know if he can hear me from the speaker on his computer.
I can hear you fine, Will.
No, I meant Bryce. I don't know how far away he stepped from his computer. Well, I'll go ahead and get started, and I think he'll probably be back in a second. But Olivia, as you may or may not know, you know, Community Board 2, you know, our shoreline is essentially the Hudson River from Canal Street up to 14th. And so I have a couple of questions which sort of relate specifically to our jurisdictional area, and would also apply to you know, CB6 and whatever the community boards you know, above on the west side are as well. You know, when you look at the sort of mitigation measures that the city's put in place, and Bryce alluded to some coordination with the city agencies, so far those mitigation measures go down the east side, wrap around Battery Park, and then come up and stop at Chambers Street on the west side. And there's essentially nothing that the city has planned at this point for the west side above Chambers Street. So I guess sort of the first question is, how do you envision, you know, the big U? How far do you see the big U as going? Does that include, you know, the west side up to and above 14th Street? So I think that's, and you know, that's kind of the first question, is how far do you see the jurisdictional area expanding when it comes to looking at, for instance, shoreline measures? So that's sort of the first question. The second question relates to the point that I believe Alice and Wendy were making earlier about sort of the jurisdictional challenges. You know, they get even more challenging, I think, when you get above Chambers Street on the west side, because you have Hudson River Park Trust, which administers the park itself along the Hudson River. And you also have the state DOT, which administers the bikeway and Route 9 there, aka West Street and the West Side Highway. So what, if any, coordination have you done with those agencies? Is it planned to coordinate specifically with those agencies as you move up the west side and look at shoreline measures? And then the third part that kind of goes along with those two questions is, you know, when you look at kind of granular shoreline and also, I think you called them non-structural measures. I mean, how granular does that get? Are you looking literally block by block at measures that are planned on each block? And kind of, you know, in order to get that granular, I would think you have to maybe have additional studies done. I know on the east side, for instance, there was a lot that was uncovered when you went underneath the ground and you were looking at the various infrastructure, some of it which was kind of unknown. I remember hearing about maybe unused Con Ed conduits and telephone lines and stuff like that. So, I mean, what additional studies do you think would be needed along the west side, for instance, to kind of know what the cost is going to be and what the most effective measures would be, again, when you get down to those specific granular measures? So sorry for the long-winded three-part question, but it all sort of relates to that area above Chambers Street on the west side, including our district.
So I'm going to do something not kind, and I'm going to take the easy questions. I'm going to leave the one about the coordination of other agencies to Bryce. But I can answer your first question, which is how far So do we plan to go up on the west side? And it's driven by shoreline elevation. According to the interim report, the reason my eyes were looking over to the side was I was pulling up that report just to confirm. But it looks like we go up as far as maybe 34th Street on the west side under the shoreline-based measures. So we are anticipating evaluating it. We're not sure what it's going to look like. It's really driven by what we can justify. As you have identified, for instance, when you look at the, say, road raisings or just trying to put a flood wall there, which tend to have a very deep base, we're going to run into a lot of utilities. So we just don't know what that looks like yet. To get to your question about how granular we're going to be with the non-structural, you're going to see a lot of that in the final report. What's coming out in the draft report this summer is a lot of our calculations are being done by these reaches, which are basically by water body and county. So basically lower Manhattan, we have Manhattan County on the east side, New York County. I live here. I actually live in Community Board 3, by the way. So yes, we have New York County on the Hudson River, New York County on the East River. So beyond that, we went by the elevation, and we're going to identify on a reach basis, and we are counting on community boards to tell us, you didn't go far enough, you didn't account for how narrow it is at Canal Street. You know, you need to really rethink your assumptions about road raising here or putting a wall here. And that's part of the feedback process that we want when the draft report comes out this summer. So that's all I have to say on that.
You had asked about the coordination with the city. Prior to this,
with the Hudson River Park Trust and the state DOT specifically. Yeah.
Okay. I don't recall state DOT specifically, but they may have been involved with some of the coordination meetings we had before the study was paused. We have had a number of meetings with dozens of representatives from New York City agencies regarding our plans a couple of years ago, but we haven't had a chance yet to resume those discussions. Right now, as Olivia had mentioned, the main thing is making sure that there's enough at risk that can be damaged that warrants the high costs that we have that we think are reasonable, hopefully, for that region. Whether we're going to have the level of detail to say in this area it's going to be a flood wall, this area a structured levee system, this area raised promenade. We may not have those details, but we should have sufficient amount to be able to make the recommendation for the further evaluation. As I mentioned, some of the more complex features and some of the shoreline-based measures, particularly in downtown Manhattan, certainly would qualify, are likely going to need additional design and environmental evaluation after the study is completed. So as it stands now, there's so much critical infrastructure, so much at risk in downtown Manhattan. I can't see that not being a primary feature in whatever plan we come up with. To have the level of detail of it, we may not have so that people can go down to the block and building level, but they should have an understanding of what the concept is for that area and what the process is for working out the further details as we advance.
Thank you. Yeah, and just in terms of some of those non-structural measures, I mean, are you also looking at what might be termed green infrastructure, rain gardens or permeable surfaces or other, micro measures like that to try to mitigate, drainage issues per se?
That's usually something that kind of falls within the interior drainage, how the city deals with the piping out of the rainfall. We generally take those kind of things into account if we're adversely impacting them from whatever we're proposing. But we typically kind of deal with flood waters when it comes to rain, when they kind of break out into a river channel. So where those pipe would discharge out into some water body that would be more of a creek in the city, or the water bodies themselves, that's kind of when it falls within our mission statement. So we would look to evaluate that. When it comes to non-structural measures that we might have for that area, it's primarily probably going to be more of a structural approach, complete the big U. But as we develop non-structural, we won't have the granularity, given that it is 900 miles of shoreline within the study area, to go down to the building or block level. But we do hope to have it on an aggregate basis by the various economic reaches that we've broken out within our HEC FDA model. So as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to have all of the answers. Hopefully we have the main ones addressed, at least in a sufficient form that people can at least give feedback, and other agencies can give us feedback on this draft report, so we can refine and then really dig down as we advance the study to get into the final report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thanks. Great questions. Thanks very much. I think somebody else from Community Board 2, Brian Pape, is that how you pronounce it? Welcome. Brian, you're on mute, I think. Diana, is that something?
It looks like he's unmuted, but we can't hear you. Brian, you could try changing your audio settings. I'm going to send you a message with some troubleshooting options.
While we're waiting, maybe we can go to Lewis. I don't have a last name there, but from the attendee list.
Lewis Kleiman.
Oh, hi, Lewis.
Hi. In terms of community information, do you intend to have any dialogue directly with the communities, apart from what's been done in the past and apart from what you might be presenting to community boards? And I just leave you with this thought that it's very nice to go to community boards, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are really responding directly to the communities involved.
Community outreach is always challenging, and particularly on a big study like this, given the vast area. Whatever avenues that we can utilize to try to get our information out to people and try to gain their feedback. As Olivia mentioned earlier, the Texas Coast study has actually made some pretty good improvements on trying to do that type of outreach in an online fashion, but we're always open to new ideas, and to the extent that we can utilize existing outreach tools that exist within the state, the city, the borough, the community boards, we would very much welcome that opportunity to broaden and get better outreach on the study, given that it affects so many people.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Lois. Brian, any luck there? No, still can't be heard.
I do have his questions in the chat, so I'm going to read them out. Looks like there are two. The first is, how is net benefit calculated? It seems each storm is damage over large areas, so alternative 2 would protect and have a larger benefit, a largest area versus this other smaller protection areas with higher net benefits.
That's a very good question. Alternative 2 does by far have the greatest benefits. That is to say, it avoids the most damages because it has the greatest geographic coverage. We're trying to flesh out in the other alternatives a lot of additional measures to try to get a more comprehensive apple to apple, so that every area that can warrant some type of action has it identified in our plans. But that being said, alternative 2 with the storm surge gate that goes between Sandy Hook and Breezy Point on Rockaway Peninsula would be by far the largest storm surge gate structure within the world, and is a monumental challenge to construct, or would be, and has by far the highest price tag of all the alternatives for that reason. And given that it would take, we think, upwards of 3 decades or more to construct, and all the costs associated over that time period with that construction, it delays the benefits that we would have so far, that it doesn't stand best. The net benefit calculation isn't overly complex. It's basically, we look at what the plan would be in terms of the damages avoided compared to the no action alternative. So you have that benefits, and you have the cost, and for the cost we have to take into account not just the cost of building the structure, but operating it, maintaining it. With that many gates, it has a pretty high maintenance cost. And then also the cost for the engineering design of the structure, and the interest during construction, which is basically the monies that are spent trying to build the structure over those 30 years. We don't get any benefit back from it. So there's an interest that's applied on our analysis for that. So when it comes to a net benefits, it's basically just the benefits minus those costs. And that can either be done on a present value basis, which all of our analyses so far have been, but going forward, it can also be on an average annual basis. But it's basically just the benefits minus the cost, what gives us the biggest bang for the buck. The one other critical criteria that comes into our formulation is environmental acceptability. And I haven't really spoken to it. I had the one slide that talked about the different type of environmental considerations, but all of the alternatives that we have are conceptual, and all of the things that we've identified, while they have been done elsewhere, that's not to say that any of those features, the storm surge gates in the lower bay, the upper bay, any of these locations, are environmentally acceptable. And so there's a lot of evaluations that we have underway that we're looking to kind of get at that environmental acceptability issue, and we may not have the full answer until we get actually after the study, when we start would do the tier 2 analysis. So those are the real key critical hurdles, is you have to have the greatest net benefits, but it has to be environmentally acceptable. So we're trying to get at both of those.
I have a follow-up question from Brian here, which is, did the Corps participate in Stanford, Fox Point, and New Bedford barriers? They had excellent cost-benefit ratios.
The Stanford barriers actually and Fox Point were built by the Corps, and I don't know about the one in Fox Point, but in Stanford, that's actually still operated and maintained by the Corps of Engineers. And those are fairly small barriers on just those single creeks in those urbanized areas. So those might be somewhat comparable to what has been included in some of our alternatives for some of the smaller creeks, like around Newtown and Gowanus. Of course, Newtown and Gowanus have some HTRW issues due to past contamination that would have to be resolved before we could advance those coastal storm risk measures in those areas. But we have looked at those facilities, and for that matter, we've also looked at storm surge gates as they've been done down in Louisiana post-Katrina, as well as internationally. There's actually a work group that the Corps of Engineers has established with international agencies to try to coordinate what's been done, not just in the US, but then of course, Europe has made great strides in St. Petersburg and England, a number of surge gates on the Thames River and other areas, and also of course, Amsterdam and Holland have a number of storm surge gate structures and levee and flood wall systems throughout those areas. So there's a very large international as well as national collaboration group on that.
Okay, thank you. And this was Brian's second question. Didn't the city reverse the Big U plan and demand a new plan instead after 5 years of community contact?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak too much for the city. To my understanding, they have been looking to advance the Big U concept from the East Side Resiliency Project, which was funded in part with a grant money that was provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. But since then, they've also made commitments out of their capital program for advancing, I believe they call it the Two Bridges Project, which basically starts at the southern end of the East Side Resiliency Project. It goes down to the battery of the Brooklyn Bridge, and most recently has come up with their proposal for advancing the financial district and the seaport area. I don't believe they've made commitments on the funding on that, and that's kind of one of the areas, as I mentioned earlier, that we need to work out with them. But my understanding is that the Big U concept is still, from a shoreline-based measure approach, kind of the best solution for addressing coastal storm risk. And the studies that we have done so far under the hats also kind of endorse that broader approach. But to the extent that the city has any reservations about any sections, I think we would want to have those discussions with the city, and would like to hear what their considerations are.
Thank you, Bryce. I think that's it from Brian, and thank you for your patience,
Thanks,
Brian.
Brian, those are great questions. Thanks very much. I think we have one last question from another committee member, Rosa Chang.
Thank you so much, Alice, and thank you so much, Bryce and Olivia. This has been phenomenally educational, and is such a critical issue for all of us downtown. This is a quality of life question. We recently had, actually, I guess last month, a presentation from the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency, which brought together the variety of different projects that are being worked on downtown. And we realized that we basically have 5.6 miles of perimeter that are going to be worked on. That's not including, of course, your study that's going, from Tribeca upwards. And for us downtown, also pretty much along the perimeter is, if we have parkland, that's where it is. And so to the quality of life question, when we're talking about projects that are going to take, at absolute minimum, probably like 3 years, more likely 5 for each section. Some of them, they're saying 15 to 20, which might translate in real life to, 25, 30. And then your projects, which you've outlined, might be anywhere from 9 to 18 years. Given that we have such density in Manhattan, and that our parkland is all essentially at the perimeter, when you are considering these projects and the cost of these projects, are you also considering what infrastructural investments you are able to make the city livable during the period of construction, so that the people, the hundreds of thousands of people that live here, have access to open space, which we are realizing with this pandemic is absolutely sort of essential civic infrastructure. So, I mean, is that even a consideration, or is that just is that not part of the planning of these projects? Because I think that that's a ramification that we must address.
I fully agree with you. And I think that is something that we would likely have to engage in great earnest kind of later after the study, when we're in the design stage, to start the implementation of it. The issues of how you enhance all of those public spaces that are so critically needed. Hopefully we won't have the pandemic that many years out, but I guess time will tell. But nevertheless, we have to ensure that, we can't ask the city to be on pause for 10 years while we build our project, taking so much critically needed park space out of operation. So how we best accommodate the needs of the community while these resiliency and risk management measures are put in place is something that will have to be done during the what we refer to as the PED phase. Sorry, we speak in acronyms. Pre-construction engineering and design, basically the phase after the study, but before actual construction starts. So we'll have to work out what the first piece of construction will be, work out the details for how we would do that construction in a way that would be considerate of the needs of the community, and take into account the type of features that would be needed for that. I can say that the cost that we have been assuming for doing that section of the project in the alternatives 3B, 4, and 5 have some of the highest cost per linear foot of any of the features that we have. So we do acknowledge and understand that there would be a huge amount of challenges associated with that. And I think the city has kind of in advancing the Eastside Resiliency Project, of course, different community, different area, but still a lot of the same headaches, problems that have to be overcome, challenges and opportunities for us to maybe make what's there now even better. Not just resilient, but more functional, and maybe something that we can have that's, you know, better for community use going out into the future. But we won't have those answers, I don't think, during the study, just that we have hopefully sufficient funding planned for being able to do those type of things.
Thank you. I'd love to request that you do actually consider that from the get-go, like integrate that your approach now, just because to ask a community to live for 10 to 20 years without parkland is
it's a non-starter.
Yes.
It's a non-starter. I understand. Yes. And
Thank you.
We fully acknowledge this.
Thanks very much, Rosa. It's a really critical point. And in fact, it's interesting that currently on the east side and the west side, two major parks have closed down or are closing down. And I'm just curious, the one on the west side is the Wagner Park, part of Battery Park City Authority's plans. This is South Battery Park Coastal Resilience Plan that goes all the way up into the northwest plans later, but the south one is imminent. I'm just curious, was the Army Corps involved at all in reviewing those plans and the closing of Wagner Park and all of that in terms of anything that you're considering doing in the adjacent waters?
We were, but kind of as I was mentioning earlier with the financial district plans by the city, when it came to the Eastside Resiliency Project, since that was being led by the city, in part with federal grant funds, but nevertheless a non-federally led project, that was addressed through our regulatory office. So they had to evaluate the things that kind of fall within the Corps' purview in terms of the regulatory regime, the waters of the United States, so any of the fill actions. But once it got past the water side and got into the land side area and the considerations of how to deal with the parks and the closures and that kind of fell outside of our purview. So to that extent, that kind of falls more within the state and the city's environmental review processes.
Well, I guess to end this, it would be great to, really try to press upon you the importance of working together, both with the community and with the various state and city agencies. And I'm really hopeful that we could actually start to have that kind of conversation now. And specifically with DOT and MOCR and the community boards. When do you think would be, a helpful time to consider doing this? In other words, you mentioned that it's the summer when the study will be done, but then the design phase begins. If you can just clarify the staging here just one more time for the future.
The study will not be done by the summer. The draft report of the tentatively selected plan will be the summer. So that's really the first official Corps document. The interim report was done a few years ago just so we could try to get what information we had out to start getting feedback from other agencies in the public in terms of what we had been evaluating. But this first draft is kind of the very first point where we say, we think this might be the right fix for coastal storm risk problem for this study area. It may not be, we might have a second draft that's been done on other studies that have this kind of level of complexity and scale. And there will be a final. And as I mentioned with the tiered EIS, for the complex features that we identify, those that we can't get to a full resolution in terms of environmental acceptability during the study, There will be a whole separate Tier 2 EIS process, which will have its own public outreach after this study. So this is, I would say, the very first official start of coordination when we release the draft report this summer. And that will be by no means the end of it. We welcome feedback. We'd love to share what information we can. We, of course, need to coordinate that with our higher authority offices and our non-federal partners before we kind of release information so that we're all kind of on the same pages in terms of what we're going out with. But I think once the draft report was released, undoubtedly it'll have its critics. Undoubtedly it won't answer all the questions that everybody has. But hopefully it establishes a framework so that people can get a broad understanding of what type of measures for what areas we think might be best in terms of getting the biggest bang for the buck and that might be environmentally acceptable. And from that, we can kind of start digging more into the details of, okay, how do we implement this one feature that affects, downtown Manhattan? How do we do this one feature that affects the Jamaica Bay, Hackensack Meadowlands? There's a number of communities that have a lot of risk that still is outstanding after Hurricane Sandy that we're trying to address in this study.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. So just two quick questions. So when you say the design phase begins, what exactly are you referring to?
So the Corps has basically 4 phases, if you want to think of them, 4 stages of civil works projects. There's a study phase that we're in now.
Somebody's phone?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that feedback is from.
I think I got it, Bryce. Go ahead.
Thank you, Diana. So there's a study phase that we're in now. That concludes in June of 2024. After that, there's the design phase, which is where we take, when we finish the study phase, the Corps of Engineers makes recommendations that comes from our Chief of Engineers, who's located in Washington, to Congress. At that point, it's in Congress's hands as well as the non-federal sponsors. Only if they endorse that plan and support it, then do we get authority to construct that action, whatever that is. Once they've made that authorization and then have given funds, we start the design phase, and that can be for a number of pieces or individual pieces of the plan. I could easily see on this study coming up with a plan that has dozens of different actions in different areas. Some might be in New Jersey, and maybe New Jersey wants to sponsor a few of those. Maybe New York wants to sponsor some, maybe New York City wants to sponsor some. So it gets, will have to be a question for tomorrow or at that point, which of those we break out as the separate design efforts from each other, which have to be done in tandem because they have an inner effect with each other. We don't want to build one project that adversely affects some other area. They have to be hydrologically consistent in that regard. But we do the design phase. When the design phase is ended and we're ready to start construction, we construct the project. That's the 3rd stage. And then the 4th is, of course, the operation and maintenance, which is typically for civil works projects, we assume that to be a non-federal responsibility, even though we do account for the cost of it when we do our benefit cost analyses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then thanks very much. It's helpful to sort of line that up. And can you just also, would you define civil works, for example, the removal of a park, a city park, and the reconstruction of it, would that be considered a civil work in terms of your definition? I'm just curious.
Well, in our projects, they're typically, the civil works projects are typically what we refer to as single mission. So our primary focus is to address coastal storm risk. And so if we identify, for example, the need to put some type of a levee, flood wall, raised promenade through a park system, the cost for doing that we include, but then if there are other features that have to be taken into account, that would be more associated with enhancements to the park, that might be something that's looked at as something that the city might fund or the non-federal sponsor to help facilitate the project. So it kind of gets into how the cost apportionment is done during the construction, but we do try to factor in a reasonable cost that takes into account those impacts to parks, infrastructure, interior drainage systems. It's not just the levee, but all the things that that levee affects. So community outreach and having functionality in terms of park areas, particularly in an area that's, where park areas, New York City, it's critical. Is certainly a necessary component to how we would advance any of these plans.
And just my last question is, are you able to consider any interim solutions for along the west side of Manhattan, which has absolutely no protection? And this could, of course, go on for many, many years as we.
I think that might get into the phasing of what areas we may want to try to do first versus second and third. Then there's also whether we can try to advance, and I know the city has made actions in this regard in other areas, whether there's some short-term interim features that can be done to address the really high-risk areas. We haven't gotten to that level of detail yet.
Yeah, just to be clear, there has been absolutely no interim measure that's been devised for the west side of Manhattan, from anywhere from the edge of Battery Park City's jurisdiction all the way up, I imagine, to 34th Street. So that's a really critical point in a critical area. There's nothing. So we could use some help. Anyway, I'm going to open up the question to, we have one more person, perfect, our former board chair and the sort of champion of all things resiliency, Kathryn Mcvay Hughes. Hi, Kathryn, welcome.
Hello?
We can hear you, Kathryn. Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, I want to thank you, Alice Blank and Wendy and all of CB1 and the 60 plus participants that have been here on Valentine's Day. And I really want to thank Bryce and Olivia for this great presentation. Can you just give us insight on, I think it was if you don't do the outer barrier, where would it go near the Verrazano? From where to where would that be, Bryce?
I'm sorry, Kathryn, I didn't quite understand you. Where would the Verrazano Narrows barrier go?
The storm surge sea gate system go if it's near the Verrazano, not the outer storm surge barrier. Where?
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. The conceptual renderings that we had it running from in the upper bay. I want to forgive me. I'm trying to remember which street crossings it was in Brooklyn over to Staten Island. But it basically was in the lower part of the upper bay. Now, some of the information that we had collected as the study was being paused a couple of years ago kind of calls into question how functional it might be in that location. Issues with navigation came up. So one of the things that we might do, depending on how that feature and that alternative bears out as we advance on the study, might be to try to relocate that more so to another location where it doesn't have quite the same navigational constraints as the upper bay does. It may not appear sometimes to some folks, but the upper bay is a critically important area for navigation. It is the largest port on the Atlantic seaboard, and every square foot of water in the upper bay is pretty well spoken for. So the area that we might look towards is kind of going in the northern area of the lower bay. Conceptually right now, we haven't done any layouts for it yet or cost estimates, but the concept might be, instead of the Jamaica Bay feature that's common in the three best performing alternatives. Instead of that tying off to high ground around the Verrazano Narrows in Brooklyn, to have that tie off to a storm surge gate structure, basically from the western tip, Norton Point on Coney Island, going over towards the northern terminus of another core project that we have in construction now, the South Shore of Staten Island. So you more or less would have a contiguous structural solution from Great Kills Harbor on Staten Island all the way up across to Coney Island, down through Jamaica Bay, Rockaway Peninsula, all the way to the Nassau County high ground area where that would tie off. So we don't know the location for sure yet on the Verrazano Narrows Gate, but there are a lot of factors. I mentioned navigation, but of course, other factors still, there's a whole laundry list of various environmental considerations. Endangered and threatened species, migratory fish, a lot of different considerations that would have to take into account related to that siting. So I can't be more specific.
Okay, Kathryn, are you set? Okay, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I was still on mute. I have a quick question. Do you still intend to develop an actual construction schedule for alternative 2 to improve on the initial 25-year mathematical projection?
In terms of the construction time for alternative 2?
Correct.
We did get, as the study was winding down a couple of years ago, some draft documents from some of our consultants related to construction schedules for that alternative. And I don't want to get too far in advance of our review of those documents and the consultants giving further evaluation to them now, work that we're resuming as we speak. But they more or less corroborated that gate structure would be in that time period in terms of construction. And it can't be stressed enough. That's assuming that funding was available if and as needed during and throughout that construction. So it was really only limited to the reasonable construction equipment and approach that you would need. It's important to consider that, that barrier in the lower bay involves over 150 separate surge gate structures to it. So it's not like we could have 150 contracts and do them all, at one time. They have to be more or less intricately developed, kind of like building a chain. You have to build one gate, then the next gate, so you'd have a good connection between them. And that would also have to be done during, throughout the year. So it's conceivable that over that time period, you'd have to do maintenance on some of the gates that were built initially while you're still trying to complete the other gates. That really is a huge engineering challenge.
Okay, I think I'm going to say thank you. Tremendous thanks to Bryce and to Olivia. Tremendous presentation, great exchange. I think the beginning of many. I'm going to, make good on your promise to come back and interface with the city agencies, the ones we've mentioned, and all the community boards. It sounds like this summer, although I'm sure you're aware community boards don't meet in August, or at least ours doesn't. So I'm not sure which side of the summer that will be, but likely I imagine in September. But at that point, it would be really great to have a very, critical meeting with all the agencies and really look at this very, very carefully. It's a wonderful opportunity. And then lastly, I just want to thank everybody that's here. A happy Valentine's Day to everyone. And just to remind everyone that on this Thursday, Community Board 1's Executive Committee will be looking at a very critical other environmental concern, which is the demolition and potential construction of the jail at 125 White Street. So anyone that has questions about that, it's at the Executive Committee meeting this Thursday. And I think that's it. I thank everyone again. Happy Valentine's Day, and see you soon. Thank you for the heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.